Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar about how to take your UiPath automation program to the next level with AI at work. My name is Fabiana. I'm part of the marketing team at Oxys, and I'm very happy to be introducing the session today and the honor of introducing our panelists and speakers that you can see here today. So from the Oxys team, we have both Eduardo and Bill. Eduardo is the managing director of our intelligent automation practice, and Bill is our senior managing director of our digital transformation practice, including our AI services. We also have Ed Chalice from the UiPath team, who leads the AI strategy at UiPath. He's actually joining us from London today, so thank you, Ed, for being here. And Leah Hatcher, who is the head of the Intelligent Automation and Business Applications program at Equity Lifestyle Properties, joining us from Chicago. We're super happy to have you here. Eduardo will be facilitating the bulk of the discussion today. And just as some quick housekeeping items, your lines are muted, as you probably have seen, but there's a question panel bar where you can leave all of your questions. We're going to be making sure to be responding to your questions throughout the presentation or by the end of the session. And we're also going to be facilitating some polling questions live. So I'll be polling those questions up and sharing with you guys the results live of the polling questions. Thank you so much for being here today, and I'll turn it over to you, Eddie.
Thanks, Fabi, and thanks for the panel for being here today. We're very excited. I know that there's a lot of people excited to talk about the topic. So let's talk about the things that we're going to be discussing today. So first, we're going to be talking a little bit about the current state of AI. What's fact, what's really reality. Then talk about a little bit about the AI maturity journey that most organizations go through. We're going to have some examples and some perspectives from the panel. Then we're going to be talking a little bit deeper into some of the specialized AI skills that UiPath offers, from document understanding and communications mining. And how UiPath is integrating with Gen AI, across the different use cases, and it's going to be an exciting conversation about that. Then really talking about a real world example of AI being used from ELS, and Leah here, thanks for joining us today. And then, making sure that we have time, then we talk about what is next, and we're diving deeper into some of the upcoming exciting news on UiPath Autopilot and how can everybody as a customer can leverage it. So let's just dive in. So there's a lot of momentum and a lot of business leaders asking some of the key questions: how to integrate AI into our applications and into our use cases. There's a lot of conversations happening in boards about how do I leverage it? How do I make sure that I don't fall behind? How do I stay competitive? And so all of that is happening. Then talking about how do I, prevent mistakes, and this is the number one, I guess, conversation that I just had at SSON event in Dallas, that we talked about AI and how to deploy it, and making sure that it's not hallucinating or making mistakes is one of the key things that organizations are trying to think about. How do I control for that? And making sure how my data stays safe. How do I make sure that it's not leaked? How do I make sure that I deploy, safe environments in order to be able to use this wonderful technologies that we're seeing out in the marketplace? So let's dive deeper into what is really happening. Naturally, Gen AI has come up like a storm to really drive innovation and excitement across every industry, with expectations of global GDP to be able to grow by 7%. This is coming from Goldman Sachs, and a lot of, like, 2/3 of US occupations be able to be affected by AI. And there's also been incredible growth, not just on Gen AI or expected growth on Gen AI, but also on intelligent document processing. This is a technology that has been known as OCR and has morphed into now being able to use machine learning models, Gen AI models, in order to be able to extract and process documents seamlessly. And that is also growing at a tremendous rate, with expectations to be a CAGR of 30% year over year for the next almost 10 years. And then we talk about how organizations, every single shared services, like we see here, 93% of them is expected or is thinking that Gen AI is a priority for them in order to meet the business demands, to meet growth demands, and also cost contention initiatives. But only 3% of them have a clear understanding of how to implement it in their day-to-day processes, how to deploy it effectively. So that is a main challenge. Also, from Harvard Business Review, most AI projects in the past have failed, which has created some really scarring across organizations that have tried to go down this path, because until now it's been very difficult for organizations to deploy AI models effectively. So it's a very exciting and moment for organizations to be dabbling into AI. So let's start with the first polling question. I want to understand a little bit of the landscape of the audience. So what is preventing you from achieving your AI goals in 2024? Is it the lack of clarity of the AI technology landscape? Is it governance and controls, like I just mentioned? Is it identifying the right use cases? Are there skill gaps? Is it funding or ROI? Please share with us so that we can get a landscape of the audience.
Yeah, and you can select more than one at the same time. So I'm collecting the answers right now. We have around 29% of votes, and I'll share in a second. What do you think, Eddie, is going to be the number one?
I would expect skills and use cases and the ROI to be the highest number, but we'll see. You're putting me in a tough position here.
Okay, so I'll share the results. So very interesting. The number one was identifying the right use cases with 71% of you. The second one was lack of clarity about the technology with 46%. The third one was a skills gap. The fourth one, funding and ROI with 25%. And then governance and control, that it's always a topic. It's actually just mentioned by 80%.
Yeah, so at least I got the 2 out of 3. So that's what I expected. I think the lack of clarity in AI, hopefully today's conversation will support a little bit of that. So let's move into the first topic of the conversation on the panel. So what is the most common journey for organizations? So to start this, I would like for, Ed, could you please chime in a bit of what you see being the typical journey for customers at UiPath as they embed into this AI world?
Yeah, thank you, Eduardo. Yeah, I mean, actually, that poll was super informative. I think where most customers start on their AI journey is typically with what we call these kind of specialized AI capabilities around document understanding and communications mining. These are AI capabilities that effectively can read a document, read a photo of a receipt, and extract all the pertinent details in order to process it. Or read an email in a customer support context or an IT support context, extract the pertinent details in order to take that next best action. And I guess really looking at that poll, the 2 reasons why people start there is because the technology is really well understood, right? So there's clarity around how the technology works, what it does, and the use cases and the kind of business case can be very, very clearly established. So it's a great way to start to introduce AI into your business.
Awesome. Bill, can you share with the audience a bit of what we are seeing with our customer base?
Sure. That poll was slightly different than I expected, and I think the one highlighting use cases says a lot, because quite frankly, my first comment was the journey should start with discovery. We see a lot of clients that it's AI is a shiny object and they go somewhere and kind of lock in out of the gate on a particular solution. But spend some time, evaluate opportunities, look at the complexity, look at the value that can be delivered to the business, and then prioritize accordingly. This will definitely 100% improve business outcomes. So I really think the polling reinforced that. Now, what I would say with that, IDP, document understanding, is often an initial phase. And I think to the points that Ed made, it's established, it's a clear pain point for businesses today. So even after we do some discovery work, we often find that sort of on the short list. Now, I would say emerging, there are other areas like communications mining, which it's a powerful AI model to extract information from emails, and then also transforming customer interactions with AI-enabled knowledge bases. I think all three of those are really driving a tremendous amount of business value at this time.
Thanks, Bill. And I think to add a little bit of also importance of why do we believe also UiPath as a platform is very unique. It's not just about the ability to deploy AI skills or call AI models, but it's also its ability to use automation to take action, to gather context in order to drive accurate responses or accurate results to automations, being able to merge the specialized AI skills when needed with Gen AI skills as as a combination. And it's a very interesting comment that we just got a quote from McKinsey that says the challenge lies in orchestrating the range of interactions and integrations at scale, being able to use multiple models to solve one specific use case. And we're seeing that again and again and again. Usually with a use case, you're not just using one simple model to extract or to get to the answer. You may be using a combination of them. And this is where being able to really deploy and call different models securely, effectively, and fast with very little limited overlay on infrastructure needs and integration needs to these different models is very exciting for UiPath customers to be able to leverage the platform, where organizations who don't have this type of capabilities have to go and have separate environments for different models, maintain them, manage them, and which creates a higher level of complexity. So thanks for that. So that being said, before we move on to this, Leah, would you mind sharing kind of your journey?
Of course. So we've been on an automation journey for about 5 years. Over the past 2 years, we've engaged with Auxis and UiPath to start trying to implement Gen AI to automate text-based across the organization, text-based responses across the organization. So, it's been a journey, but it's been a good one and successful. We're also, exploring, when we talk about use cases, using it for our knowledge base.
Awesome. And I know that we're also looking, and we've implemented also IDP across several use cases and moving through that. So it's been a great journey of adoption. And I think you've been definitely, from our customer base, one of the first ones to jump into this Gen AI world and really believe in the technology, and not only testing it or working with it, but actually bringing it to life. So that's very exciting to see it working day to day. Is actually very impressive too. So let's go through the second polling question. We're going to have 2 polling questions back to back. The first one is going to be, which of the following technologies are a priority for your organization for the next 12 months? Please select all that apply. And it doesn't matter if you've implemented or not. At this moment, is which technologies do you think will have a significant play in your journey in the next 12 months?
Thank you, Eddie. I have collected around 40% of the votes and trying to get some more before I show you the results.
Awesome.
I think Gen AI and IDP will be at the top of the list.
There you go.
Yeah, well, you'll be surprised once more.
That's good.
Yeah, all right, so I'll share the results. So number 1 is process and task mining with 56%. Number 2, IDP with 48%. Number 3, RPA with 44%. Gen AI with 36%, and conversational AI and communications mining with 28%. So what it's going to be interesting is to actually exchange this and for the next question, which is, what are you actually implementing?
What have you implemented successfully? Like, maybe you'll be planning on a lot of the technology that we just mentioned. which have you actually, and this will give us a landscape more of the where are we on the journey for a lot of the people on the call.
Right. And here, I guess we would expect RPA to be the highest one, right? Because it's the one that have been the longest. So definitely it's going to be very different what we're going to show now. If you can finish completing your votes so we have more responses, that would be great. I have around 45% of the votes. All right, so as expected, RPA, it's for around 71%, IDP and process task mining just around 10%, Gen AI 5%, and then conversational AI and NLP just 0%.
Awesome. Thank you for that info. That's exactly what we've seen across the market, and there is a massive need first on IDP and then into the other platforms. So I see IDP just being like on the first kind of metric that we show about the market. That's going to continue to grow and continue to be adopted. And that being said, so let's talk about that specific technology. UiPath has really been excelling in the IDP marketplace for the past 3 years, even though document understanding has been in the market for over 5. It's now in the past 2 years, after significant investments and really taking it to the next level as part of the technology with pre-built models that organizations can really use out of the bat with very limited training, has really come up to be the market leader in the IDP space. So in order to really dive deeper into that, I wanted to ask Ed, which type of documents can be handled by document understanding and how they're different?
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I think, we talk about UiPath structured documents. So think about forms that always have the same set of questions or the same set of fields, or an ID card or a passport. Semi-structured documents are more like invoices. So, there's a kind of loose structure there, but there might be, different rows, different columns, different elements in each kind of document. And then unstructured documents are really something you can't say much about before you've read it, before you've seen it. And they might run to be many pages long. So think about a legal document or a long form letter or a news article. So yeah, there's kind of all these different degrees of structured information, and we can process them all.
Awesome. So I assume that in order to do the extraction for every single one of these documents is not just the same way for each one of them. And we're very excited to now show a demo or an explanation of how UiPath document understanding can leverage specialized models and Gen AI models to really tackle those different problems. And that's kind of what I was alluding to in the previous slides about its ability to call the different models depending on the need.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this really goes to the heart of one of the reasons why we're recognized by leaders, by all the analysts, is because we work hard to have, to be able to support all of the different types of unstructured data which define business processes, be that like an unstructured email, an unstructured document, a structured document. No matter where that data arises, if it has a role in a business process, our goal is to be able to process it. And I think this is quite a nice demo that we're going to show now, kind of based in a loan application setting. So someone's making a loan application, you can imagine they might send an email, they'll have proof of identity, proof of residence, maybe with their kind of recent utility bills, other kind of documents all attached in this kind of payload of unstructured information. Additionally, with a letter, all of that needs to be processed. And so this demo is going to show all of our capabilities there, our structured document processing, our communications understanding, our ability to understand the actual email itself, and our latest generative extraction capabilities that can extract kind of arbitrary data from arbitrary complex inputs. So yeah, I think it's a great demo.
The loan application form is a new type of document we haven't seen yet, so we need to train a new model from scratch. Training relies on data labeling, and historically that takes a lot of time. Now, with GPT, it's as simple as selecting GPT Predict, and you can see that the document is pre-labeled. All we need to do is review the labeled fields and adjust if needed, like down payment amount value in this case. With GPT, we can pre-label any document samples, accelerating training from a week to a day or two for complex scenarios, or down to minutes for simpler forms. Once all the sample documents are ready, we can easily create a new extractor. Let's call it Loan Application Model and use the dataset we've just labeled with GPT. Here is a Studio Web workflow built earlier for this automation. It downloads the attached documents, classifies them using GPT, and then extracts all needed data from each document. The first step for us is deciding which document is which, so we can send them to the best AI to extract the data. We call this classification. Using GPT to classify documents is really easy. I just need to describe the document types. In this case, we have application forms, employment letters, and we're adding ID cards. Here, GPT increases time to value as we don't need to write rules for classification or to train new ML models. To extract data from ID cards, we use one of the pre-trained UiPath specialized AI models. For the application form, we use the new specialized AI model we just trained with the help of GPT. Since employment letters are free-form, unstructured documents, we use generative AI with GPT to answer our questions. For example, what is the name of the employee? What is the name of the company? What is the salary of the employee? Let's run the project, and you can see how the robot executes all these actions step by step. If human validation is needed for any stage, a task is created in UiPath Action Center for the employees to review. Here, a task has been created for the loan application form, and you can see how the extractor we trained with GPT performed. Everything is perfect, so we can save and continue. Another task is created for the employment letter. We review the output and click Save for the robot to move forward. As you can see in the workflow, the extracted data is used to create a new loan application in the loan origination system. As part of end-to-end automation with UiPath, generative and specialized AI enables faster and more accurate document processing than ever before.
Amazing. So, I mean, there's a lot in that demo, but really, I think there's three core messages I really want everyone who kind of watched that to take home. The first is that generative AI really kind of solves unstructured to structured data problems, right? So we can basically process any type of unstructured data and structure it. We've got all these different capabilities to do that, but if you have an unstructured kind of input, clogging up or making a business process inefficient or slow, generative AI, it should be, and AI in general should be one of your first kind of thoughts in how you can address that. And we've got all of that capability. UiPath is an amazing tool to orchestrate that end-to-end from those source systems to where it needs to be, and calling on all those different models. And then I think the third point is for anyone that's tried to use IDP in the past, like a few years ago, and they found that project to be slow, or maybe it didn't yield the kind of ROI they wanted, GenAI actually makes IDP projects much, much faster, much, much easier to implement. So yeah, I think it's a great demo, a lot of complexity, but the core message is it can all be done now.
And Ed, we have some attendees from finance and accounting organizations that were particularly interested on accounts payable specifically and the use of IDP for invoice processing. So can you guys maybe elaborate a little bit on that part for AP? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say that's probably one of the biggest use cases for IDP. So, just hundreds of implementations, thousands probably around the world. It should be very, very simple. And coming back to Bill's point, let's look at that process, look at the business case, and if it all stacks up, you should definitely address it.
From an Oxys perspective, certainly invoice processing is our most common scenario we have right now for IDP.
Thank you.
So I think as we went through the demo, we actually got to see the combination of both technologies. So Bill, can you run us through some of the actual benefit that organizations have been able to get by the combination of the technologies?
Yeah, I think this is super exciting, and obviously to Ed's comment, that the market has moved quickly and this capability has really evolved. So it's kind of like what OCR was previously on steroids. So I think it's a super exciting time, and I was actually going to touch on AP, but since we had some of those questions, I think that's an exceptional use case. And then I'll say for this in particular, this slide, this is getting into DocPath. And with DocPath, that's a specialized model. So what's exciting about this is it's already extensively trained on different document types, such as invoices, right? And that allows for fine tuning of the model as those invoices come in. It has all of that pre-training that's been completed, but then with a minimal amount of additional training, it can really dial into invoice processing for a particular application. So that makes it exceptionally powerful, and it's also much more accurate. So as you look at this table on the right side, it's based on error rate. I think I would have done it on accuracy rate, but this is really hitting kind of error rate. And you can see a general AI tool has a 35% error rate. And then as you look at UiPath with DocPath, it brings that dramatically down to where it's a, multiples improvement over general AI, as well as a significant improvement over a tier 1 IDP vendor. So, as you think about how fast the market is moving, where UiPath is from a leadership perspective, the amount of work that's gone into building out that capability to streamline the training, to have a tool also like Action Center when there has to be an update. So if there's a lower confidence level and someone has to go in and make an update, that can continue to feed the learning of those models and further improve results. So it's efficient to implement, and it provides a very high level of accuracy.
Thanks, Bill. So before we move into the next topic, let's just go through polling question number 4. So have you leveraged, I think only 10% show that they have done IDP. So for those who are not, are you planning on piloting the technology? If you guys have implemented it successfully, if you guys have tried but not been successful at it, talking to a little bit of its comments about a couple of years ago, or are you using another IDP platform, or is not a priority at this stage?
Thank you, Eddie. I have launched the polling question and gathering some of the results. Okay, so I have around 40%. We'll try to get higher before closing it. All right, so 67% are not leveraging and not planning to leverage document understanding at this stage. 24% is using another IDP platform, and 10% are in the planning and piloting stage. So it's interesting because for a few contexts, a lot of you guys that register for the webinar, over 50% of you are already a UiPath existing customer. So I'm curious, Ed, from your perspective in UiPath, like, why do you think the level of adoption of IDP from existing UiPath customers continues to be lower
Yeah,
than
I'm not on the exact numbers, but the growth is really phenomenal. I mean, so I think it's definitely, most of our customers started off with, most of our customers are starting, we're growing, and but the growth in IDP is phenomenal. But it's definitely a newer technology, a newer capability in the platform.
because one of the things that we're seeing, and Eddie, you can elaborate on this, is a lot of clients are interested, but it's just a little bit more complex to implement for their RPA traditional developers than in the past. So especially for IDP, they're kind of like needing a little bit of hand holding on the development side. So I'm curious what you guys think about that.
Well, it's definitely something that, so to answer the original question, about 80% of the licensing renewals that we had from last year from a customer base of Oxys added AI units to be able to deploy specifically DU. So we're seeing a massive adoption on that side from at least our existing customer base. And it is a separate skill set. The same skill sets that drove RPA development are not the same as being able to build the models. Now, naturally, just training the documents is just part of it. Being able to really deploy automations that can get to the end result that the business is expecting is what's difficult. So I would say that a lot of organizations are, and we constantly receive that specific request to organizations that have mastered one way or another RPA, and they're looking for skill sets related to add AI skills to their COEs. So moving along to the next topic. So let's talk about the exciting also comments that we've had and exciting news that we've had in the past, 12 months around the UiPath platform and its integration to Gen AI. So to be clear, is the integration to it is more than just calling generative AI. There's a lot of things that you got to take into consideration as you're deploying this technology in your organization. One of the biggest ones that I think it's eye-opening to a lot of the people that we have the conversations is actually being able to provide context to the prompts that we're making to generate the new content with Gen AI. A generic prompt will lead to a generic answer. A generic prompt will lead to a potentially not business ready outcome from Gen AI that leaders in your organization would be excited to just deploy to the business. So the combination of robots to do the work, the specialized models to be able to not just do the Gen AI, which you cannot effectively train. You cannot change the outcome. You can only change your prompt engineering, but also being able to go to your systems, extract information to different applications, to different portals or databases, and extract application about a specific transaction that you want to process with Gen AI will lead to a much better outcome. The ability to have a human in the loop functionality that would, for all intents and purposes, there is going to be situations where a human will need to be involved. If you apply the right guardrails and you have the right confidence and governance about your models, how are they being deployed, you will be able to make sure that you have appropriate content being responded to, making sure that we don't have, that we are not responding to specific, creating content or responding to specific inquiries using Gen AI about topics that are not supposed to be answered by the expected respondent. So think about this: you're trying to automate responses from, let's say, human resources, and they're asking a finance question. If you don't have the right outcome or the right guardrails around what am I supposed to respond to, Gen AI, if you ask any question, it will create an answer if you don't stop it. So having that governance and structure behind your ability to do that, and also being able to raise your hand and pass it to a human for them to answer to those questions that you're not supposed to answer, is what makes it a very complete, strong, enterprise-ready AI deployment. So very excited about how all this comes together. So to dive a little bit deeper into that, Bill, could you please share with us how the integration is actually being achieved by customers through the key activities and the trust layer
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to reiterate a point from the previous slide, if you could go back to that for a second. That's really leading with context. So many of you are probably already familiar with prompt engineering, but may not have an appreciation for what that is. But prompt engineering can create very detailed, lengthy prompts to get a good response. And those prompts need to include relevant business data. So that context is sort of the secret sauce that allows these models to work effectively. And without that context, the results are mediocre. So I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind. So with that, let's go ahead and go back to the next slide. So, I mean, obviously, Gen AI has progressed extremely rapidly over the past 18 months. There are many models which are surpassing, kind of human level performance, which is interesting, a little bit concerning, but I think as you consider some of these technologies and how they evolve, it can create some concern. But when you look at other industries, one of my favorite examples is with mass-produced cars. And if you roll back, and it's over a much longer time horizon, but it started extremely manual in nature, and then it went through the assembly line. Now there's robotics, in this case, it's industrial robots, and a tremendous amount of automation. And a typical mass-produced car can be created in about 40 hours of human labor, which just seems crazy. So things evolve over time, and we sort of take that for granted right now, but that's what will happen with many business processes. I like to make that point because these capabilities truly enable the transformation of business processes, and then being powered by AI allows for a much better scope of what humans have traditionally done to then be done through UiPath or a similar type tool. So things are moving fast. Now, of an important related part of that is the pace of technology change is accelerating, and that means there's a major risk of staying with the status quo. So it's very important. I think from some of the polling, like on IDP, it seems like some of you are there and some of you are considering going there, and many haven't done anything. But I think, it's one of those things that the kind of status quo presents a risk in terms of competitiveness. So I encourage you to keep that in mind. Now, what I'll say is getting to a solution like this, there's also a risk of sort of locking into a model or a particular platform. And that's where this integrated solution becomes exceptionally powerful, because at the end of the day, you want the best result that can be produced from a particular model to support that. So by having these integrated solutions to provide different types of models, and you can see some of the examples here that are touching on text, chat, language translation. There are many, many use cases come here that are completely transforming how this work was done previously. So, orchestrating across these different capabilities to be able to call the appropriate model and then to integrate that. We have many that have RPA expertise who are participating on this call. RPA is a key component to driving AI value. I think you've seen that theme through some previous discussion, but that's kind of bringing everything together and then having those pieces fit for purpose. So I think that really kind of covers, the main theme from this slide.
So, Bill, I think it's also important for organizations to understand the benefit of having the open platform benefit of using UiPath to try to deploy the Gen AI models.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are compelling outcomes by the Gen AI models, and we're living in very exciting times right now. So what's nice about this is that the platform provides connectors across all of these leading models. So don't think, in this case of UiPath, that you're sort of locked into a small set. You see all the major vendors that are provided as a part of this. You can actually also include your own models. And an important part that connects back to my earlier comment of using the right model for a particular activity, there's value in doing testing on multiple models if you're going through a very high value use case. Now, if you do that through a platform like this, you can very efficiently test different models and find what's working the best, right? you don't have to deal with standing up separate environments and having separate licenses or dealing with the sprawl of different vendor offerings. That inherently lends itself to constricting the scope of work that the team is looking at, and then that leads to sub-optimizing the result that's delivered. So having all of these available through the platform, the leaders of today, and then this platform will expand to including the leading models of tomorrow.
Thanks, Bill. But now to the very interesting part of the webinar, which is how can we actually deploy this? What are the use case? How can that be done? So Ed, would you mind sharing us what are the kind of the vision of UiPath on how to leverage both RPA and Gen AI at work?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I really loved Bill's analogy to car assembly lines becoming just more and more automated. Gen AI massively increases the scope of what can be automated, increases just the breadth of processes, the extent of the value chain, and we're starting to see customers build in Gen AI into automations, kind of adopting 3 different patterns. They can kind of be composed and joined together. They're not totally separate. But I think these kind of are really instructive to help think about the art of the possible. We call pattern 1 the reader-writer pattern. I think Leah's going to talk about that. She's adopted a similar pattern at kind of ELS, so I'll leave that to her. The second really interesting pattern is we call the analyst pattern. We call it the analyst pattern because it's really like the work you do in your first job. And so I'll give you a couple of examples on that. And then the third pattern is the co-pilot or assistant pattern. I'll let Bill talk to that as well because he's got first-hand experience. So if we could just jump to the next slide. Yeah, the reader-writer pattern is, think about all of those places in work where you have to summarize some information, right? You have to read a document and summarize into a different format and put that information somewhere else. Or think about all the times you have to synthesize and extract maybe some subset of the information and reformat and put it in somewhere else. That's what we call the reader-writer pattern. So yeah, Leah's going to talk about kind of an example, I think, in a kind of customer feedback setting. But another classic example would be, think about like logging a call in a CRM system, like a customer relationship management system, or synthesizing a customer complaint, maybe in a complaints management team, synthesizing an IT support request, maybe for multiple historical tickets. These are all classic examples of that reader-writer pattern.
And we're going to be sharing the presentation at the end. If you have any questions about any specific use cases that you want us to dive deeper into, we can definitely schedule some time to make that happen. Move on to the analyst.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I always think of the analyst pattern as often in a process, you have loads of different kind of sources of information, but they have to be joined together and kind of collated, right? And that's why you might give it to the most junior person on your team, right? So, all of my clients send me an Excel sheet and I have to put out some information from each of these Excel sheet and put it into a new Excel sheet, right? Today, that would be hard to automate with RPA because every client would be using different column headers or different structures of that spreadsheet, and they change that every day. So it's hard to automate that with classic RPA. But yeah, this is a really kind of great examples here of kind of competitive analysis. As maybe you're looking at your competitors' web pages, and every day you want to get a flash of like the products they're selling and the pricing they're listing against that. Gen AI is really good at kind of putting that data out, synthesizing it. Another great example would be a kind of contract, commercial terms extractor. So maybe you have this big kind of database of all your historic commercial kind of agreements, and you just want to put out the start date, the end date, the inflation reference point, the number of kind of lots purchased or whatever. That's a classic example of an analyst doer pattern. And if we go to pattern 3, Bill, I think you have some kind of direct experiences, but pattern 3 is all about assistants, co-pilots, autopilots, those chat interfaces for knowledge workers.
Yeah, in fact, as I think about this, when you look at the knowledge base assistant and the service help desk, you can sort of combine that. So as you see the diagram at the top, this is showing an inquiry that's coming in through a conversational interface going to an LLM. So if someone has a question about a company policy or procedure, they can often get that result directly from a knowledge base by prompting that knowledge base to come back with that response. Another variation is kind of connecting in with the service help desk. There can be a user who needs something like a password reset. There are many common scenarios that go into a help desk, and often a person is handling those today. So we're seeing a lot of movement in this space as one, to be able to clarify with the user what the request is, and then what's really, interesting about this is then determining the action that can be taken. So now a human doesn't have to be involved in any of that resolution. And there are I picked the password reset, but there are many other cases like that too, where through the request that comes in and determining the path of that request, that can be actioned directly. Now, there can be other cases where there's a question that comes in or a particular need that's not addressed by the automated solutions or available from the knowledge management base, and that can then go into the human in the loop component. But as you think about those things, ultimately, as these questions come in, the idea is that the scope of what the human has to cover becomes less and less, and much more of this can be automated. And there's a theme that's come across all of these. So it's about interactions, it's about having a human in the loop, and we have the RPA expertise. So when there's a decision on something, if it's actionable, action it, take care of it automatically. And that's sort of the modus operandi as we think about these different patterns.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. So very excited to talk now about Leah and her experience on specifically integrating both technologies. So before we get into this, Leah, can you give us a little bit of a background on ELS? And then so that people understand what does the company do, and then we can dive into the use case.
Yes, for sure. Sorry, I was muted. ELS is, we own a leading manufactured home community and RV parks with over 400 communities across the United States.
Awesome. So looking at the use case, sorry, I think this one went over automatically. So would you mind walking us through it on what's the use case and how we were able to solve it together?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, we're referencing pattern 1, where a user sends a request. UiPath goes in, they extract the pending request and uses ChatGPT to produce a response and then sends a response, right? But what's really important is how ChatGPT examines the request, understanding the sentiment, identifying potential conflicting topics, and adds guardrails. And I know, Eddie, you briefly mentioned this in the beginning, how important the guardrails are. Guardrails helps to, keep the process on track. It keeps some structure around the process, making sure that we're producing a coherent response and validating the response to make sure that that it's appropriate and coherent, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you would think that, sometimes in order to get production ready automations with ChatGPT, one prompt would be enough to get an answer, which is not necessarily accurate. There's a lot of verifying and reprompting using the same technology to ensure that the outcome of the automation ends up being, production ready, business application ready, which is one of the key things that we were able to build together to drive a lot of the benefits. So would you mind walking us through kind of the objectives, some of the challenges that the business had, and what are the benefits that you've been able to get by combining both technologies in real life?
No, sure. The objective was responding to user inquiries. It's an essential part of our user experience, building trust and credibility. Also highly important is accurate responses, which increases engagement, right? So some of the challenges we had were manually reviewing responses, right? It was an entire manual process, a very small team available to respond to inquiries from our users. High volume, very high volume, and low efficiency. And it was different inquiry types, right? So we had different languages, long comments, right? in simple, right? We want to be able to analyze all of them across the board, and we couldn't respond to everything in time. And so the goal was to achieve 100% timely response rate to all of our user inquiries. So we utilize UiPath API and UI activities to extract the inquiries from different sources and provide context. We integrated ChatGPT for drafting the responses, applying business rules, and managing human in the situations, right? So we also implemented governance and guardrails, right? We keep talking about the guardrails and how important they are, but it truly is around the forbidden words and scenario detection to make sure we are giving an appropriate response to these user inquiries. Comprehensive considerations list for ChatGPT in drafting responses to avoid those hallucinations, which are very critical. So the benefits of it has been over 95% touchless user inquiry processing. Less than 5% are flagged and routed to a human across the organization. We've got 60% reduction in human intervention, thousands of inquiries across the organization processed per month. And we have the ability to respond to inquiries in different languages. As mentioned, we have properties across, the United States, and, we're very, very diverse. And it's a highly scalable solution. It can handle increased volumes without adding additional human resources. And so this was very successful for us. Implementing, a combination, as Eddie mentioned, of all of the technologies that we've talked about.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that I think there's a lot of organizations that have tried to solve this type of issues with RPA in the past. Like, I've been doing this now for 8 years, and people trying to flag keywords, for A/B inquiries, like where's my invoice, trying to flag them. And that made it very unsuccessful engagements and very unsuccessful projects. I remember those days when people were thinking that, the technology was made for this. But now with the combination of specialized AI and Gen AI, like with communications mining, we can extract key information that provides context to a Gen AI model to create a response. So think about A/B inquiries. Where's my invoice? Where's my, when will I get paid? Understanding which is the vendor, using comms mining to extract that information from unstructured emails, but then being able to use Gen AI to use that as context to being able to create a response that then can go to a knowledge base, look at where those invoices are in your systems, and being able to respond to that automatically. And you can think of this in the HR space, you can think of this in the customer space, you can think of this in the IT help desk space. You can just continue to use this text-based inquiries happening across every organization, and how this technology can really be leveraged to provide a lot of benefit. So thanks so much for sharing, Lee. I think that was it's definitely a great success story. Then before we move on to, I know we have 5 minutes left, but before we move on to the final topic of the webinar, we wanted to ask one question. And what best describes your intelligent automation COE today, your COE model? Is it full in-house? Is it a hybrid with a third-party development team? Are you only using a third party for ongoing operations and support, so managed services? Are you looking to increase third-party support in the next 12 months? Or are you actually looking to decrease third-party support in the next 12 months? So please take a few minutes. Let's try to be quick to answer, so that we can get to the final topic of very exciting, the next in the roadmap for AI with UiPath with Autopilot.
Thank you, Eddie. I have around 20% of the votes, and we'll try to wait to get to at least 50%. And Eddie, are there any other ongoing evaluation of Gen AI topics at ELS? That was one of the questions that I got.
So I think the knowledge base, the pattern number 3, I think Leah mentioned that on their journey on the first section, where we are looking to really automate specific inquiries about procedures within the organization. There's a lot of data and process information and I guess standard operating procedures across every organization that is seldomly used. So by using Gen AI, you'd be able to leverage and be able to make it more searchable, usable. So there's a lot of that is potentially what we have on the roadmap. Pattern 3. So in the interest of time, we would like to
sharing the results for just 1 second, Eddie, really quick. So 38% is using a hybrid model, while 23% is fully in-house. And then, sorry, so 38% is using it for development, 23% is using it for ongoing support, and then 23% is looking to increase third party versus 23% is still looking to decrease.
Okay.
A little bit of a mix.
Okay, thank you. So, Ed, would you mind sharing with us really quickly? I know we only have a few minutes left on our time about Autopilot.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, it's great to, the session already has shown a number of places where Gen AI is advancing the state of the art and what's possible with automation. But probably one of the biggest announcements we've made in the product this year is our autopilot capability. So for every type of user of UiPath, we've released an autopilot, or it's either in GA or preview, and it's going to be in GA in a few months. So what's recently been released is autopilot for developers. So think about in Studio, an autopilot capability that will allow every automation developer to create more powerful automations faster. You can just type in natural language the automation that you want to perform. You can upload screenshots of apps that you want to recreate. It's a very natural interface to enable people to create powerful automations orders of magnitude more quickly. I think one of the earliest polls showed how interested people are in the discovery capabilities of the platform. So, process mining, task mining. We're introducing autopilots there to enable, analysts to radically uncover, actionable insights much faster. Just analyzing a dashboard, analyzing statistics, no matter how they're presented, can often be daunting for a lot of people. But we're introducing autopilots to have a more guided kind of experience to getting actual insights. And then probably one of the most exciting autopilot announcements and investments we're making is autopilot for everyone. So if you think about that kind of spectrum of tasks that we all have to perform at work, there's all of those repetitive tasks. We talked about, AP earlier, or, HR or customer onboarding, all these different kind of processes where we have repetitive tasks, but there's this huge long tail of tasks that are, occupy a lot of people's day. Autopilot for everyone is a way to automate that. So you can just write in natural language, get all of the invoices I've received via email and put the core details into an Excel sheet. And Autopilot for Everyone will try to automate that. And the key advantage there is that it can work across your application. So we're seeing copilots pop up everywhere, but UiPath's Autopilot will operate across applications. And critically, it can also invoke the automations you've developed. So it has these kind of subroutines that allows you to kind of execute tasks more efficiently. So it's a really exciting area of product investment, and it's really kind of our first stepping stone into this more kind of agentic AI, these AI systems that really kind of act as kind of almost like colleagues in your organization, and can kind of make decisions and perform tasks, and almost like they kind of report into you. So it's super exciting stuff, and I'd love to share with you some of the demos and assets that we've released.
Yeah, so I think that we are at time, and thanks everybody for joining. The presentation actually had a demo of Autopilot for developers. Whoever is interested in it can request the presentation to Fabi over email. Fabi, you want to add anything else?
Yeah, no, I think if you guys had any other further questions that we haven't responded, we can address privately. I think one quick one that I wanted to address, we got some questions about integration of UiPath with ServiceNow and SAP. So we did wanted to clarify that that's a big part of your partnerships, Ed, but I wanted to double check with you about that part because
Yeah, we should have a whole bunch of, you know, pre-baked activities and kind of pre-built automations for that. I think we should be able to connect whoever asked that with the relevant content.
Excellent. No, thank you so much to everyone. And as Eddie said, you can either shoot me an email or Gabriel Vega. You probably got a lot of the automatic emails from the GoToWebinar platform from Gabriel. So we would be happy to give you guys a copy. And thank you so much, Leah and Ed, for joining us today. Hopefully we'll be doing more of this in the future. A lot to cover.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody, for joining.